Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the 34-hour reset and how to avoid it. Now, if you have been in this industry for a while now, you already probably know how to do that. But if you're new in this industry, first of all, welcome. And second of all, this will all be new information. Now, when I just started in this industry, I was under the impression that everybody had to do a 34-hour restart or reset. But after doing a little bit of digging, I realized that if you know how to, you can actually avoid having to restart for 34 hours.
So why would you want to avoid this reset anyway?
Well, there are two main reasons. Number one, if you're in a remote location and are forced to do the reset in your truck, it can be very lonely and depressing. And number two, you can't move during this reset without violating your hours of service. So basically, you're stuck there losing money. So to explain how to avoid the reset, first let's go over the general hours of service information. And to do that, we'll be using that board right there.
I like it. I think I'm going to keep it.
Okay, so here's our board. So there are 4 hours of duty statuses. Number one, there is off duty. Off duty refers to when a driver is not working. Now then there's sleeper berth. This refers to when a driver is resting in the cab of the truck. Sleeping, resting, taking a nap, watching a movie, doesn't matter. That's sleeper berth. Then there's on duty. This refers to the time where the driver is working but not driving. So what does that mean? That means things like refueling, inspecting the truck, loading, unloading, maintenance, all of those things. The driver is working, but they're not actually driving. And then, of course, there's the driving status where the driver is actually maneuvering the truck behind the wheel. So to make it simpler, these two statuses in blue are when a driver is not working. Now, these two statuses in red, pink, whatever you want to call it, it's pink, but I want to pretend it's red, is when the driver is working. Now, there's a ton of other information I could say about this because there is so much to know about hours of service, like limits, exceptions, exemptions, etc., etc., etc. But for the purpose of this video, which I want to keep as short as possible, I'm not even going to go there. So here's a rule I do want you to remember for this video. A driver can be working for a maximum of 70 hours in 8 days or 60 hours in 7 days.
So which one is it? Is it 8 days, 7 days, 10 days?
Just calm down, okay? If you're an owner-operator, you can choose which kind of cycle you want to work by. So you can either choose to work 70 hours in 8 days, or you can choose to operate on a 60-hour, 7-day period. But if you're a company driver, the company actually sets their own rule as to which cycle you are going to be following.
So what happens if you reach your hour limit before the 7 or 8 days?
So that's where the 34-hour restart comes in. So let's say you're an owner-operator operating on the 70-hour work time during an 8-day period. And you're working and you're on duty and you're driving, you're accumulating those hours, and after a period of 5 days, you exhaust your 70-hour clock. But wait, you're allowed to drive 70 hours in an 8-day period. So after 5 days, you exhausted your clock. Now what? So that's where the 34-hour restart comes in. You have the option, instead of waiting for another 3 days to pass to reach those 8 days, you can do a 34-hour restart where you don't move. You're either off duty or in sleeper berth for 34 hours, and that resets your clock completely. So after 34 hours, you get back all of those 70 hours and you can start your cycle again.
So wait, does that mean my earning potential is limited?
Technically, yes, but that's the purpose of this video, to teach you how to avoid the 34-hour reset and keep your wheels rolling so that you can keep making money. Okay, let's look at this board. So let's say you're someone who drives on the 70-hour, 8-day cycle, which means you can be on duty plus driving for a maximum of 70 hours in a period of 8 days. So here we'll have our days, see, 1 through 8. Here we'll put in the hours you worked each day, which means the hours on duty plus the hours you actually drove. And here you will have the hours that you have left at the end of each day. So let's start with day 1. Let's say on day 1 you drove and worked on duty 10 hours. So at the end of the day, you have 60 hours left in your cycle because 70 minus 10 hours that you already used is 60. So you start day 2 with 60 hours in your cycle. Let's say that on day 2, you work for a total of 14 hours. And that means 60 minus 14, you have now 46 hours left in your cycle. Now day 3, you work 12 hours, which means you have 34 hours left in your cycle. Day 4 is 14 hours, which means you now have 20 hours left in your cycle. Again, as a reminder, why 20? Because you started with 34 hours on day 4, you used 14 hours of those cycle hours, so you're left with 20 hours. Day 5, you work for 13 hours, which means that you're left with 7 hours. Day 6, you use up all the remaining cycle time, so you're left with 0 hours. And then you have day 7 and day 8, where you cannot move because you exhausted your 70 hours in a period of 6 days. By the end of day 6, you have no hours left. Okay, so now I redrew the board a little bit, and now let's look at how you can actually avoid having to do a 34-hour reset. So, for the purpose of this board, I already filled out how many hours you worked and how many hours are left. So here, you worked on day 1 10 hours, so you were left at the end of the day with 60 hours in your cycle. Then day 2, you started with 60 hours in your cycle, you worked 10 hours, you're left with 50. And you go down, and by day 8, you work 8 hours and you're left with nothing. So what happens then? Well, because the rule is based on 70 hours in an 8-day period, on day 9, your cycle starts on day 2 because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Day 9 would be your new day 8, if that makes sense. What happens to the day 1 hours? Well, that's the great part. This falls off. So all those hours you worked are returned back to you on day 9. So starting on day 9, you were supposed to have 0 hours, but you don't. You actually have 0 plus the hours that are returned to you. So now you have 10 hours left. So you start day 9 with 10 hours. Let's say you work all of those 10 hours and you're again left with 0 hours. So what happens? On day 10, all the hours you worked on day 2 are now returned to you. So you get another 10 hours back. So at the end of day 9, you had 0 hours, but at the beginning of day 10, you have 0 hours plus the 10 hours that were returned to you from day 2. So again, you have 10 hours. Now let's say on day 10, you work 8 hours and you have 2 hours left, right? So what happens on day 11? On day 11, as you guess, all the hours from day 3 start coming back. So you had 2 hours, but you worked 8 hours on day 3. You have 2 hours in your cycle plus the 8 hours that are returned. So you have actually 10 hours now, and you can use them to continue driving. And this rolling over of these hours is what prevents you from having to do a 34-hour reset. Think of hours as a valuable resource, and they really are, because running out of hours means you can't drive, therefore you cannot make money. So you have to treat this valuable resource with care. Make sure that you're not overspending it, make sure that you're saving it where you can, and that way you can always keep on driving without having to get stuck for 2 days not moving. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.